evening on a Wednesday night to all you video store babies and children of the 80s and children of movies. My name is J.W. Colwell. Welcome to Generation Movies on a Wednesday night. Joined as always by an incredible co-host and a wonderful friend, Rich Drees of FILMBUFF Online. How are you tonight, Rich?
I'm doing well, and I'm really glad after all of last week and what you've had to go through, you're doing well too, my friend.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a long, fractured 5 days, Rich. So
Sure.
you and I, just to give a little bit of history for everybody. So we were going into Wednesday, whether or not we didn't know we were going to do the show or not.
Last Wednesday.
And last Wednesday. And I said, we're supposed to get hit in the middle. Like, we should be able to get the show in. I'm pretty sure we can get Secret of NIMH in. But the hurricane had other plans. Our power grid in the city of Deltona had other plans. And my power went out at 5 o'clock. And that set forth a series of text messages and cancellations. And we thought we would get my power back before the hurricane actually hit us.
Oh, you sweet child.
You stupid boy, you. We did not get power back until late Sunday night. So it went from Wednesday at 5 to late Sunday night. And by Sunday, I was in a hotel with my wife, gasping for air and not having slept in 5 days. And it was one of the, I'm not comparing my condition or my experience to anybody else, because people who lost their livelihood or their business or their home or lives or family or loved ones, I'm not comparing in any way. It was a bad week for me and my family. My wife was very supportive. My aunt was incredible. People we live with, and the two boys we live with that are, the nephews that are the apple of our eye, were all spectacular. I was not. I was a basket case. I didn't realize how much I really need energy, how much power I consume, how much I'm wrapped up in movies and television and being able to do things when I want to do them. And popping something in the microwave, can't do that. We threw away $1,500 worth of food, which is replaceable, but still that's a lot of money because we have freezers. Yeah. We have freezers because we're a bigger family, we're extended family. So we have freezers and a lot of stuff. So we were working on dealing with that, but everybody's okay. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm with you. We're going to talk about a movie, a 1982 film tonight called The Secret of NIMH. We're ready to go. I'm excited. And I want to thank everybody that reached out from the Indie Escape Network, including all the hosts, including yourself, including Joe Ridgely, David Madison, everybody, CJ, Brandon, everybody that reached out. I appreciate everything. It was a rough week. Let's talk about movies because that's what I find to be my happy place. And God, after this past 5 days, I need my happy place. Any comments? Let's see. CJ's like, I'm glad you have your power back. CJ, you're glad I have my power back. I'm glad I have my power back. It was a slog, and it was also, it was weird. Like at night, our entire neighborhood was pitch black. It was the scariest, but also the most quiet I've ever seen anything. The only things you could hear were generators and dogs barking. And the occasional scream, which was nerve-wracking because you didn't know which way it was. There was no air conditioning. It was bad. We couldn't use the pool because the pool runs on a motor. So the pool wasn't clean, so we couldn't use the pool. It was not great. But we got through it. We're stronger for it. We're probably going to end up having to get a generator. So let's start making those generation movie bucks. Because
quick.
Sure.
Before your power went out, had you had a chance to watch Rob Zombie's The Munsters?
No.
So there's a blessing right there.
There is so This is what I was talking about on the show earlier. I did not get to see the Munsters. It is
It's
so down on my list of things to watch. And you want to know when the power went out, Rich? I had just settled down. Everybody was home. We're getting ready to pack it in and keep everybody close and do everything. I turn on Andor and I get 10 minutes into Andor and the power goes out.
ouch.
Yeah, that hurts. That hurts. Joe comments, good evening, gentlemen. Glad you guys are back and everyone is okay. I am too, Joe. Thank you so much. Glad we're back. Glad we're back on doing what we do. But yeah, it was no, I had not gotten to see the Munsters. So that's the other thing. You want to know the funniest things I was getting peppered with? Are you okay? Have you watched the Munsters? And people on both sides not realizing that I was in the hurricane. Some people just don't pay attention that I live in Florida. So we had one person going, "You liked it, right? Like this is one you're gonna like." And then I was like, midway through, this person who's a big fan of our show and big fan of Loud and Nerdy, and basically said, "Oh, I didn't even realize you're in the hurricane." I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pepper it. So I had very little power. I was telling Rich earlier before we started the show. We were charging our phones and iPads with the car. So people would have to sit out in the car for like 5 or 6 hours to get 40%. And so I was very down low talking to people at all because I didn't have the energy to waste on it. Like I just didn't have, like, you conserve it. You're like, should I write a comment to somebody about the Munsters that might get them upset? Or should I just leave it? And when I get back to my life and everything's fine next week, I'll hit the Munsters and everything else that has to come with it. And I was telling it was so far down the list. Somebody asked me if I'd watched it yet. I'm like, no, we got the power back on Monday. I had to catch up on Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, which are like, they're both way up above the Munsters, and a couple other things. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even on my priority for this week because Hellraiser's coming out on Friday. So I've been a Hellraiser fan my entire life. That's what's priority on Friday. So, but priority tonight, and again, thank everybody who asked and everybody who questioned. I'm eternally grateful, and I thank you for everybody for being good friends. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer your burning Munster questions. Rich, you would not believe the amount of questions I got, because I think my bitter hatred of Rob Zombie and his film oeuvre is fairly well known, because I can't stand what he did to Halloween, and so now I think people pit him against me in an effort to, like, oh, see, he almost made a decent movie. It's like, okay, well, great. That's great. I'm so glad he's still getting money, and we can't get, directors like Ty West and Ari Aster have trouble getting cash. They have trouble getting their films made. We can't get a Trick or Treat 2. We can get a Rob Zombie Munsters from Universal, though. Thumbs up. Good job. Okay. But
working the IP.
God damn it. But what we do have tonight here, we do have something interesting tonight. I'm very excited about tonight because it's a movie a lot of us saw as kids, and I don't think any of us understood it as kids because, frankly, Rich, I don't even understand it as an adult. I feel I'm a smart person, Rich, and there's lots of chunks of movie where I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Why is the owl like so goddamn creepy? Anyway, stuff. But The Secret of NIMH, it's Don Bluth. It is this wonderful adaptation of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, which is a very, I guess, a prevalent children's book that Don Bluth had found. And it becomes Don Bluth's first production under his production banner, which we'll talk about later, because the key to Don Bluth and the legacy and everything is not necessarily sequels to The Secret of NIMH, but the legacy of The Secret of NIMH is Don Bluth, grows a Disney competitor, I guess is the best way to put it. They had some pretty resounding success with some animated films. So
He
Secret of NIMH is the first.
He started off as a Disney animator. He was working for Disney. He worked on The Rescuers. He worked on Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. He worked on Pete's Dragon. And
which doesn't get enough love. That is a Disney film that does not get enough love.
No, it does not. And he was working on The Fox and the Hound, which came out in 1981. And at the time, though, he was starting to get disillusioned with the conditions there at Disney, with how they were treating the animators, not giving them a whole lot of freedom. They were kind of locking them into a certain style, that they wouldn't let them explore, being more storytellers in their work. And ultimately, he said that he had had enough. He resigned, and 10, 11 other animators just stood up and walked out the door, literally.
With him. Yeah, and because he had cachet, right? Because he was one of the people that knew Walt Disney. And the interesting side notes you get, like the pre-production on Secret of NIMH, is that, one of the more interesting aspects is that when he's leaving Disney, basically it's because he makes a short film at Disney called Banjo the Woodpile Cat, right? And and they basically, they do it on their weekends, on their time off, him and Gary Goldman, who's his most trusted and loyal collaborator. And they basically have a falling out of Walt Disney because Walt Disney at this point has gone corporate, which is what the company is today, where it's basically where you look at it and it's maybe the magic is gone because, it's a corporation, has stockholders, have to answer to people. And, even in his autobiography, mother, hurricane. I'm just going to say hurricane. Even in his autobiography, he basically said that he had, Walt Disney had once said to him, the worst thing I ever did was go public. The worst thing I ever did was open me up to stockholders and open up storytelling to stockholders, which is kind of an interesting legacy thing that we're dealing with to this day.
We will always be stuck with this.
Yes, this is a problem forever. So before we get into the deep of it, if you like this content, of course, Indie Escape Network, a lot of good stuff. We have a lot of good champions on the network. Joe Ridgely is a guy that runs a show at the end of the night on Sunday nights. We have Brandon Brooks on Friday nights with IOU. We have CJ Robles on Monday with My Manic Mondays. And we have Gabe on Tuesdays with his show. All incredible storytellers. We also have a nice kid coming in. Tim Melican's going to have his second big basically show where he brings back all this of the cast of one film. So there's a lot of good things going on the network. Please subscribe if you like the content. Not only do you do YouTube, but you can also do Facebook, which is great. And at this point, we will launch into the production side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it all starts with this falling out over the Fox and the Hound, how the Fox and the Hound was treated, how the Fox and the Hound was kind of like mismarketed or whatever you're going to say, because at this point, Disney Animation is struggling, right? We're talking about a time where Disney Animation is in classical animation mode. They're trying to make their movies work. They have all these like waves of animators that are kind of working for them. They're going through a rigorous process. It's hand-drawn, hand backgrounds. Everything's all hand stuff. And Bluth will take that with him when he decides to leave Disney, and he brings it to the Secret of NIMH. And it becomes this
kind of like one of the dark eras of Disney. And I'm fascinated by it, but I haven't had enough time to really kind of like dig into it. More
the movies are dark. They like, and it's not like a weird quirky fun dark like Nightmare Before Christmas dark. They're dark in the sense that they're kind of slow. And I don't know what the deal was. It went from, like some of the stuff in the 70s, like Rescuers Down Under, actually Rescuers, and then Rescuers Down Under came much later. but rescuers and things like that, the aristocats, things like that, they lead up to this, and then they get into the 80s and they're just falling all over themselves. Fox and the Hound is a sweet movie, but it's not great. It's not Sleeping Beauty or Snow White or any of the other things that they've made, And
Disney's live action stuff at that time was kind of dark too. I mean, 1979, you had The Black Hole, which is a fun film. It's their attempt to do a Star Wars science fiction epic-y thing. And then the last 10 minutes are a complete freaking acid trip. And I just love the film.
Yeah, it has robots killing other robots. Robots killing other robots. Maximilian Schell acting really dark. Some sort of thing going on where people are tied to computer programs and stuck in like computer chairs, and they're human, but they're not human.
Oh, yeah, it's all messed up.
That's what I was saying to you before we talked tonight. Like, what is going on? These movies have things where I don't understand why we went so dark so fast. And maybe it's a reaction to the times,
Mm-hmm. Could be.
But so they come up with what they're doing. And basically the first thing he does is he digs through Walt Disney's old production vault, and they basically Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, the book that The Secret of NIMH is based on, was offered to Disney and turned down. And then basically Bluth and Gary Goldman and John Pomeroy and 8 other people they plucked from the Disney staff set up their own studio. They work out of his house. They work out of his garage. They eventually moved to Studio City. And while they were still working at Disney, they produced the Banjo the Woodpile Cat as basically a proof of concept that they can make animated movies. And that basically they can do whatever. But they take it to Disney, and Disney looks at it and says it's not that great. We don't care about Banjo the Woodpile Cat. And that makes Don Bluth so sad that he just like, I'm out. Gotta go. And so production, when you hear about this film, it's basically Bluth, Bluth trying to pick a story that he'd heard about from the Walt Disney Archives. I don't think he was doing it maliciously, right? I don't think he's making the malicious choice. I think he looks at it more as, I'm going to take a movie that they couldn't fix or produce, and we're going to make it, right? We're going to make that movie. And I have, this Banjo the Woodpile Cat, I think I can do this, right? So he picks this movie. It's fascinating, Rich.
And also it should be noted too that when they established Don Bluth Studios, this is the first feature that they dig in on. They also do a little bit of work here and there, including most notably the animated sequence at the beginning of Xanadu, which again, not a great movie, but it's some nice animated work. If you're an animation fan and you've never seen Xanadu, and I know Xanadu has its fans, and I apologize to you, I love you all for finding something in that movie that I can't seem to see, but
Gene Kelly, Rich.
Gene Kelly on roller skates, first time since Always Sunny or something, or I can't remember which movie that was now, but that animated work at the beginning of the film is definitely worth checking out and finding and watching.
So the other major thing that you come across when you're looking at the production is the script was problematic from the get-go. So they take a crack at the script. Stephen Barnes writes the script. He gets the credit consultant in the final product. And his script is more in line with a straight-ahead adaptation of the novel. Basically a novel about a mouse that enlists the aid of rats that have been experimented on by a mental health facility. Again, perfectly amicable 80s kid fare, apparently. And basically enlist the aid of these rats to help her move her home while her child has pneumonia, which I like. the moment you're not in Neverland on these 80s kids films is when you look up and one of the cast members, an animated mouse, says to another animated mouse, "Oh, I think the boy's got pneumonia. He could die." And you're like, they don't put that stuff in kids' movies now. It's kind of like, but it's just weird. Like, I look at it weird. But so that script that Barnes had wrote, and he gets a consultant thing, basically is it's very much tied to the author's work. It's very much tied to it has a plot. It moves things through, and it works along the basis of the novel. Don Bluth looks at that and goes, no. He changes a lot and makes a lot of additions that are more mystical elements that aren't present in the original novel in any way. And one of the quotes he gave to Barnes on a script rewrite was, "Regarding magic, we really believe that animation calls for some magic to give it a special, fantastic quality." And it's so there's a fighting going on in this script, and you can see it through the production, but you can also see it in the movie, Rich. Like, there's a sequence where there are animated rats who build a giant configuration where they can move a cinder block.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm not giving anything away that this has to happen. Mrs. Frisby's house needs to be moved, and she lives in a cinder block with her kids. And the rats devise a giant, complicated pulleys, and it's nice. It's a great art project.
This movie touches on something that I, as a kid, always loved, and even now, when I rewatched it, for this episode, I was like, it kind of like retouched this love of the idea of like small animals who are intelligent or tiny little people, like the littles, and they take common, everyday human household objects and repurpose them in imaginative ways for their own needs.
Yes, like the littles or the borrowers.
All that stuff. I love that kind of stuff. As a kid, it was just always like so endlessly creative, and it just totally made me happy to see that kind of stuff. And this movie does that a lot in here, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. That's neat. Okay, they use this as an elevator, and now they do the other thing with the thing. So
those parts are great.
Yeah,
those parts are great. It's this mystical element stuff. There's like one of the things that Bluth adds is a magical amulet, Rich. And
yeah,
I'm watching the movie, Rich, and I don't know, like, two things. I don't understand the magical amulet. I don't know how it got to be magical. I don't know why a rat has the magical amulet. I don't know why he just gives it away. And then he's, again, it's 82, so 40 years later, you haven't seen the movie. Then he gets murdered because he doesn't have his amulet anymore.
Because another rat wants.
Because another rat wants the amulet. And then Bluth actually says the stone or amulet is just a method of letting the audience know that Mrs. Frisby, I think, has found courage of the heart. Magic, maybe. Spiritual, yes.
It's not needed though.
It's definitely not needed. Nicodemus
take all the magical bullshit out of this movie. Everything with Nicodemus and his, I can make a book float and it can open up so Mrs. Frisby can read about her husband. I can, my walking staff will like magically come to my hand when I hold it out.
A book, man. He has a book. He has a book that writes itself. It's crazy. It's wizardly.
Is absolutely unnecessary to the plot. Nicodemus can still be a wise old rat without like the trappings of bullshit Merlin magic user or Merlin the mouse or whatever you want to call him. The only reason this whole magic amulet seems to exist is as a MacGuffin to make a save of some characters at the end without getting too much into the to a spoiler. And honestly, that's the one part that really didn't work for me as I was rewatching it. I was like, I don't think we need any of this. Let's just cut all of this right out of the movie. It just does not work in relationship, especially because the rats and the mice are all we're told are, were, products of a lab experiment that raise their intelligence. So we're in the realm of science and, you know, on the outskirts of science fiction a little bit. And suddenly for no reason doesn't it the two types of genre don't match here at all.
There's always the confusion. So it's Mrs. Frisby.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other big production problems that comes up is that they're given a cease and desist, sort of, because Whammo, the creator of Frisbee products, says your Mrs. Frisby has nothing to do with our Frisbee, and different spelling, but doesn't matter because we're corporate and crazy. So they had to go in and fix it in post. It also led to so much confusion for me today, because when I was writing the thing where we put up a thing previewing the show, I know it's Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, right? And that's the name of the book. And then I know that it's Mrs. Frisby in the movie, but you keep on hearing it out of the corner of your ear going, is it right or whatever? And then you find out about this amazing thing where Whammo comes down on them and says, you have to fix it. And the only thing we can do is fix it. And by that point, John Carradine had passed away. So they couldn't fix any of the name stuff in post. So at some points in the movie, it's Frisbee. And at some points in the movie, it's Frisbee. And they try to hush it. Like, it's weird. But it's one of those production stories where you just go, that's amazing. Like, that. Why does that happen? So the animating on started in January of 1980. It goes to June of 1982, right? So basically all the way right up to the point where they're releasing this movie, right? And one of the things that they're looking for with the animation is detailed full animation, but it's a super tight budget. So it becomes this long, arduous task for these people. Gary Goldman, Bluth, all of the animators that came over were working 110-hour weeks during the final 6 months of production, which is something you never hear. You never hear. Like, animation takes so long in this day and age, where you like the time that is put out. So these people were really working labor-intensive cell framing, cell painting, character work, and then just that's a lot of stuff. It ended up costing $6.36 million, which is about $40 million now. So you're looking at a minor animated project right now. Nothing of the Disney variety or any of even some of the lesser, like Ice Age Studio kind of things. They also ended up mortgaging a lot of their homes. $700,000 to complete the film. That is crazy to me, Rich. That they would
speaks to their conviction that they knew.
Definitely does.
Yeah, I can't fault them.
Oh no, it's incredible. It's an incredible it's an incredible story when you have, but can you imagine those sitting there looking at the source material and looking at it and going, okay, I know what the source material is and I know exactly how it works. And Don Bluth comes in and is like, we're gonna have a magic amulet. The rat's gonna be a wizard. And just kind of changing all this stuff. And then you're working on those things, and like then they're changing names, and there's posts that they have to do. Like, it just seems like a troubled production, but also like kind of a guerrilla production. So incredibly exciting because you're doing something that nobody's ever done. You're going after Disney in Disney's wheelhouse, which is animation. But also like you're mortgaging your house. You're putting it out in the middle of the summer, a very busy summer. And you're working on it for 110-hour weeks where you're just like, just killing yourselves trying to get everything done. You know what I mean? It's a fascinating thing. And it leads to a really great movie, but also mildly disjointed. It's like we've had two disjointed movies in a row. We had Garp and we have this, and they're very disjointed. They're like from two different people are making them at all times.
Yeah.
Weird.
I mean, we often talk about how like movies are sometimes too long. It could maybe be a little bit more tightly edited. This movie needed a couple more connective pieces between some of these sequences, because it kind of just like jumps from one thing to another, and you're like, wait, what? Why are we here? And it takes a moment or two to kind of settle into what we're seeing.
Well, and it's also like it has the makings of a cute family animated film, right? Where you're looking at it, the inner workings of a mouse family and how they live their life on a farm, right?
Yeah.
And the rats are kind of this weird side hustle where they're like basically, these rats are from this experimental place where you're like, what the hell? How did we get here? You know what I mean? Like, what happened? And then it just kind of like it's all over the place, and there's a piece of it where you think that Bluth is like looking at it going, I wanted the magic, so it needs to have magic. And everybody kind of just went, well, he's in charge.
He's paying the bills.
He's paying the bills, so we're good. But that's I think it's one of the weirder kids movies. Like I just, for me, every once in a while, like I'm looking at stuff going, how did this get made? And part of it is the 80s. Part of it is the distinct thing where you're looking at the 80s stuff and you go, how did this get made? And like, how did it get made? And not only how did it get made, why did it get made? And this is strictly a why, right? It got made because he found something that the Disney Corporation didn't want, and then he went after it. He went after it and just went crazy with it. It's really quite interesting.
Yes.
But so it opens, and this is where things get bad. So it opens on July 2nd of 1982. I don't know if paid attention to the show, but July 2nd of 1982, there's several things opened and playing at that point, including this tiny movie. It's little, really. It's called E.T.
Never heard of it.
E.T. is only a month, less than a month in on its run. It's not good, Rich. It's not good for our little rats and mice of NIMH. It opens, Rich, amazingly. It opens to $385,000 opening weekend. That's not good, Rich. In any circumstances, any correlation of any of the numbers we've ever had, it actually might be the lowest opening weekend we've had in any of the movies we've discussed on our show. It opened at 88 theaters. It only reached 700 theaters total at one point. And it lasted 4 weeks in the theater.
So I think part of the problem here is not so much the quality. I mean, and we're going to get to the reviews, and the reviews seem fairly positive. I think it was a case where the distributors and the exhibitors were kind of bullish on it, going, it's not Disney animated, so is this going to be any good? And are people going to care because it's not Disney?
Well, and also, and that's part of it. I think you're right there. And Disney plays hardball. Like, if you cut a Disney movie out and you open another movie, there's a chance you don't get another movie. The other thing you have to look at with exhibitors at this point is they're not multiplexes. You in NEPA, you have Cinemark, and you have the Regal, and you have Wilkes-Barre. They're all theaters that have 8 to 10 screens at least, right? Cinemark has 20. The Regal has, I think, 14. Down here, I have an AMC that has 18, right? 18 screens. So it can play on a bunch of screens now, right? But if you're a theater that's playing E.T., and you're a one screen theater or a twin theater or a God forbid a triple in 1982, because again, not a lot of multiplexes at this point, right? Are you giving up a screen of E.T. for The Secret of NIMH? No.
Animated movie that's not Disney with a guarantee sell of being Disney.
Yeah, it's the box office is low because it's a hard sell, but the box office is also low because of the economics and the time, because you're looking at it going, they couldn't give up the screens, and the other movies that had opened in that time frame, right? The other movies that you're looking at that had opened in that time frame, right around the week that NIMH is opening on July 2nd, you have Tron going into wide release on the 9th. You have The Thing, Blade Runner, Megaforce. You have Monty Python. You have Firefox. You have E.T. still playing strong. You have Star Trek that just opened less than a month before, and Poltergeist opening less than a month before. So you have all these movies that are hits early in the summer, and you end up getting 88 screens on your opening weekend and never going above 700. So it leads into, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just kind of, the movie eats itself.
It's something we've kind of said before too. The summer of 1982, it was an embarrassment of riches. We had a lot of great movies, and that's what we've been talking about for the last umpteen months. But unfortunately, it does mean some of the maybe not as good, but still fairly decent movies like this were just kind of like totally pushed to the side because of it.
Well, yeah, but even the great movies were pushed to the side. So this one's like a good movie.
This would have done better.
Oh yeah, no. If it opens in 2022, it does fine, right? It's a little bit weird. You definitely have people fighting over the mystical stuff. Like that's a new thing. I don't know if you're doing this. Like when you're watching something. So this is silly, and we're going to go off point for a brief moment. But now that I'm watching stuff, I look for stuff where people are going to fight about it. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I was watching in the hotel the other day. We were watching Under Wraps 2. It's a Disney movie about a mummy. Okay?
It's Under Wraps. Ha ha! I get it.
Ha ha ha! Yeah. Okay. Look, we have young nephews, and they love spooky things that aren't spooky. So
gotcha.
It's a happy mummy movie. Okay. Think of it like a Harry and the Hendersons kind of mummy movie. Okay. But basically, in this mummy movie, there's a gay wedding, and I leaned over to my wife as we're watching Under Wraps 2, and I'm like, people are going to be furious that the mummy has a gay wedding in it. And then she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I said it. This movie would have caused some sort of kerfluffle because somebody somewhere would have asked the question, why are the rats dabbling in magic? It would have come up, and you would have to say, well, Don Bluth, because he wanted magic to go along with his animation. And I understand the concept, but it's like one of those weird things. But so it doesn't do well. It ends up grossing, how about this, Rich? It ends up grossing $10 million total, which isn't great. But it kind of falls in line with a lot of the other things that were playing during that summer. The adjusted box office, domestic box office is 31 million. So it'd be like a moderate hit now. It'd be moderate. But it's an amazing thing when you look at like the other movie. Like again, you're talking Tron would gross 26 and be a much bigger hit than this. And then you also look at like, E.T. is grossing 439 million. So it's like, it's a weird kind of place for Bluth. And I at his core, he probably was super disappointed, but also realistic about what exactly happened. Right. But the other side of it, and again, something else that needs to be talked about, they didn't do any kind of MGM didn't do any kind of promotion for the film. And the people who had put the money into the film, MGM had said it was going to open for like in at least 1,000 venues on opening weekend, but they ended up going less to the 88, and then it never even hit the 1,000. So they were, basically kind of screwed over by MGM in this regard. And MGM at this point, and it's like they're making movies and they're doing well, but they're starting to get a reputation for being troubled. And it just, but this movie ends up becoming more successful on home media, and we'll talk about that in the legacy thing. It ends up becoming part of a classic kind of thing. Now, it also does. Let's talk about critical response. I'm going to say I like it. It's a beautiful movie to look at. It's disjointed for me, but it's gorgeous.
One last thing about MGM in 1982. Have you ever heard me talk about David Beagleman, the MGM exec?
No, I've never heard you talk about. This is a good point to talk about him.
This guy was a crumb.
He's a bad person.
Oh my goodness, yes. He did some financially dubious things in the past, and actually, when he was, I
wonder if he was part of this 1,000 screen thing that they were promised.
Most likely, he left MGM late in '82. He went off because he was doing some bad things, and the board basically said, "Okay, you've got to go." And I know
leave, sir.
Yes,
you stole fizzy lifting drinks. I said good day.
He took off, formed his own production company called Sherwood Productions, and he was allowed to take one project he was developing at MGM with him at the time. And he took the project he was absolutely sure was going to be his Raiders of the Lost Ark, his Indiana Jones character. And because he wasn't paying very close attention in the meetings he had with the writer and the director of this project, he kind of did not understand what it was when it finally came out. And I am, of course, talking about my all-time favorite film, Buckaroo Banzai.
Okay. So this is somebody you know a lot about.
If you ever heard there was an executive who just didn't like the movie, and that's why they never got a sequel, because he kept blocking it.
Oh, that's the executive, huh?
That's the guy. He also sold off a lot of distribution on the movie, and Paper Trail was not always.
Now I do remember discussing a Paper Trail with you. That's interesting. So okay, so if this guy's running MGM at the time. Yeah, if this guy's running MGM at the time and they're expecting 1,000 screens, because again, if you would expect 1,000 screens if you put your house on the line, right? If you're one of the people that put your house on the line, you better fucking open it. It better be 2,000 screens. Shit, I want my house. But so it becomes this. So I bet you it is him. I bet you he's a terrible person. He sounds.
I would not be surprised. I'm in what we've researched for this episode. We haven't come across. Definitely, it was Beagleman who said yes. We're going to put you on 1,000 screens, and then turned around and said, "Pfft." But
I like the. Yeah, that's about right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if this was his call, and basically kind of screwed this movie.
So reviews are interesting, right? I'm going to say to you, as somebody who likes animated movies a lot, it's got a great story. It's unbalanced. I don't know that kids are going to gravitate towards it. There is going to be a lot of explaining to do for the children. And to be honest, unless you watch it first, I don't know how you get, I don't know how you explain. I was telling my wife as I was watching it today, I'm like, I don't know how I explain to my nephews why the mouse has a magical necklace. And sometimes you need to be able to have that guidance to be able to help them along to the next portion. Okay, well, she has a magical necklace. Sometimes the kids go, okay, and they're cool, magical necklace. Sometimes they go, why is it magical? And Rich, for the life of me, I couldn't fucking figure it out. And I'm watching it going, okay, and the book's magical, and so it's unbalanced for me, but it's beautiful to look at, and the animation is gorgeous, and it's not something you see every day, and it's certainly not something we've gotten animation wise in the last 10 years. Reviews, would it shock you to learn that it's at 93% on Rotten Tomatoes? And the audience score, 93% with 88 reviews. Audience score is at 85. I think they're high. Although I was also thinking that too, watching it going, if I was stoned, I might enjoy this better. 85% from the audience. Okay,
I have problems with this movie, but I'd still recommend it at least for a one watch. So that gives it a plus up. If I was a Rotten Tomatoes critic, that would be a thumbs up kind of a thing.
Yeah, the visuals are worth a watch. It also kind of has, it has a Pixar feel, because it feels like the concept of the movie is very high Pixar-ish. Rats that were part of a mental experiment that develop I could see a total Pixar movie where they're like, they build a little rat city. I mean, they've already had the rat movie, but if they were trying to, it has very similar themes. And it's sweet. It's definitely a sweet. Although it does bring up questions about pneumonia gets dropped pretty easily. Also gets pneumonia gets dropped, and also he could die from the pneumonia. It's like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Where you're just like, the critic I picked on this one with regards to the review, Rex Reed loved this movie. Rex Reed is in love with The Secret of NIMH. I looked at the review and I'm like, it's an incredible review where they basically just, I can't believe how much I enjoyed this movie. He called it, it looks like a Walt Disney movie, only better. The secret of its success is that it's been made by a breakaway group of 13 Disney animators who grew disenfranchised with what they said were failing standards of imagination and take taste on Dopey Drive 3 years ago. I think it's a fascinating thing when he looks that up and he goes, it's better than Disney. And I'm like, I can't say that, Rich.
No.
As a critic with you today, I look at you and I go, no.
Even with Disney being kind of at a low point, one of their low point cycles. I think
The Fox and the Hound is better.
Yeah. I will say this. I mean, a lot of the animation does have that same Disney feel and style to it. They haven't quite kind of reached out and done their own thing. So that is where there's a definite Disney parallel. But it's much darker. Disney would never go this dark. There's
spinning moments where the bubbles are these green bubbles that are completely you're transfixed by them, but you're also like, why do they have to be so fucking dark? Why? And I'll give you a perfect example of something where I looked at it and went, it doesn't need this. They're underwater, right? They go to visit Nicodemus. They come up with an idea. They get in a boat. The boat's in a little river underneath. Things are falling down all around them. The good guy rat is kind of pushing it. Nicodemus is at the front. And as they're pushing past a certain point, you just see a snake kind of fall into the water, and it goes, slithers right up, right into the water, right into the frame. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't need that at all.
It's just to add a little bit of extra visual flair. I don't mind that. What I really liked, though, is if you look at a lot of the painted backgrounds.
Beautiful.
They're stunning. Even when they're almost monochromatic. They're really beautiful. They're kind of dark. They're incredibly detailed. They feel realistic, and yet at the same time a little bit impressionistic as well. And I was
like a picture book. they're very much like a picture book. And like that one sequence, that one transition, there's a transition early in the movie where it's the camera going in on the mouse house, right? And it gets to a certain point and the window becomes, you can see the child on the other side of the window, and he spins it, he opens the window and he comes out. It's beautiful because the backgrounds are so beautiful. They look painted on. It looks like something. Do you remember Color Forms?
Yes.
It reminded me of Color Forms when I was watching it today, but it's beautiful. It's a good movie. Like, it's not a bad movie. It's all about families sticking together. The villain is really good. The villain's great. He's a douche.
My only problem with the villain is we don't get to him until well halfway through the movie,
and he doesn't actually have a point. He's greedy and he likes blood. You know, like he wants to stay in the bush that isn't safe. You know, he's the guy that, you know, the Nicodemus is like, we got to branch out, and he's like, no, the bush is good. You know, he very much is a villain that is in line with the times. Kill the transcendent leader. And we need to stay in the bush. We need to protect our own. And screw that mouse. I don't like her. Needing help. Very much in line with today. But the main thing one of the big things about Secret of NIMH, legacy. So, Secret of NIMH, you know, first off, it is a great production that allows. It's a great calling card, and Don Bluth gets to basically come in and go, I made this and I made this, and so he doesn't get his chance to do all the stuff he wants to do with the Secret of NIMH. Now, there are some bad sequels that are not done by the Bluth Corporation, like by Don Bluth Animation. They're awful.
There was just the one, and less said the better. But I think the real legacy here is everything else that Bluth Studios would go on to do after this.
The funny thing is, Rich, they get away from the mystical. The funny thing is that everything else he does after this isn't mystical. So, like, he puts all the magic, well, not everything, but okay, not everything.
I have one very specific instance where I'm going to disagree with you.
I understand. But like The Land Before Time or American Tail or Thumbelina or The Pebble and the Penguin or Rockadoodle, all these movies that he ends up making, you know, in Dublin, Ireland, where he sets up a studio, are all a result. And I'll say All Dogs Go to Heaven, but is that the one you're going to nail me on?
No, actually.
All Dogs Go to Heaven has mystical quality to it too. You know, it's a dog coming back from dying. So,
Dragon's Lair, the video game.
Yes.
Dragon's Lair in Space Ace, two stand-up cabinet arcade games that you go into your local arcade at the mall, Spaceport, what have you.
You now play them on your Xbox, Rich.
I know.
They're both available. But yeah, but they're incredible. Yeah, they're
basically laser discs and with animated sequences, and you kind of pushed your hero in various directions.
That game was so goddamn hard, Rich. It was so goddamn hard.
It was, but it was also very revolutionary for combining Laserdisc technology, which was just brand new, and kind of channeling it into a video game type direction.
Yeah, and I would say that his, Secret of NIMH comes into place, and it gets made, and it allows him to have this calling card, and it allows him to go and the other movies he ends up making, Rich, some of them are very profitable. Land Before Time becomes a big franchise for him. American Tail, he works with Spielberg. Some dude named Spielberg. Then they do some other ones. They end up doing Anastasia and Titan AE, which if you've never seen Titan AE, I really recommend it. I really like that movie. I think it's well done.
I saw it when it came out, but I don't think I've gone back to it since, and I feel like I probably should.
It's a decent movie, but Anastasia has a lot of people who think that Anastasia is a Disney film.
Mm-hmm.
It's so close to a Disney film with so many of the pieces and components. But it ends up becoming that his legacy becomes not necessarily Secret of NIMH based, but it's the person that comes out of the Secret of NIMH.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and there's really no chance. Bluth is 84 now. There's no real chance for him to like kind of. There's probably one or two movies left if you want, if he's feeling up to it or whatever, whatever he's going to work on. But he did, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Land Before Time, American Tail are all a direct result. And American Tail is closest with the animation style to this. And also, I think it's funny that two out of his 5 top movies are mice movies. He's a big mouse fan. And like you're saying, though, all the things of the everyday household objects that end up becoming bigger to mice, or like a table being like a little thing of thread, or that sort of thing. He is an amazing animator. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that the legacy that has to be discussed, he left Disney and took 17 animators with him, Rich. Disney had a rough time from 81 to 89. Part of the legacy has to be... part of the legacy has to be what could have been, right? I mean, if he had not gotten disjointed and jaded about the Disney, the way Disney worked, or, part of it has to be what could have been at Disney, right? I mean, that's part of the legacy, that this guy came in, made this movie, and left Disney, left everything he was happy with, and kind of went on his own and took a chunk of their talent with them. What movies did we miss?
Yeah, if Disney decided to play ball with him more,
Yes. Would American Tail have been a Disney film? Would The Land Before Time been a Disney film?
Would they have happened?
Would they have even happened without him leaving? So it's an incredible legacy, and it's also an incredible what if, which we don't always get.
Yeah.
We sometimes for us when we do our show, Rich, the legacy is established, right? Based on what's happened with the movie since, based on what's happening currently with the movie, based on how people are looking at it. But this is a legacy of what if. What if he had stayed? What if he hadn't left? Could he have talked Disney into making The Secret of NIMH? Would there have been checks and balances on the aspects of the film that are a little bit unbalanced?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Would they have taken the mystical out of it and kind of like said, hey, we can make this movie completely cool with the rats and the mice, and we can make it a little bit wonkier comedy kind of thing, little less strenuous. I mean, that sequence with the cat and her trying to not poison his food, but drug his food is terrifying. The cat itself is terrifying.
Where she's trying to stop the plow is intense. And, and if parents are just like, oh, it's animated, so I'll take my kid to it. If they hadn't learned their lesson from heavy metal, then, and did this this time around.
That's another legacy. The 80s kids movies are very challenging, right? Mm. This is one of them where you're going to have conversations. You might end up having a conversation about pneumonia. You might end up having a conversation about, why is that guy got a wanton bloodlust? Why is he such an angry rat? But it's a good thing to have, and I enjoyed rewatching it. Mm-hmm. I also don't know that I'd ever rewatch it again.
I mean, I ponied up for the Blu-ray because I think it was under $12. And I'm it's going to be on the shelf. I'm not going to get rid of it. And will I pull it down just to watch for something to watch? Probably not. But if I'm writing about the films of the 80s or the animated films of the 80s,
I feel like the next time we come to it, it'll be a solemn moment, like Don Bluth passing away, or it'll be like that's because that'll be the top of his
animator
of his
who
story.
left Disney to establish his own studio and gave us American Tails, Land Before Time, and The Secret of NIMH passed away. That's the headline of his obituary.
Absolutely. Well, here's the headline on our show.
And it's not an obituary either.
It's not an obituary either. Nah. Not at all, Rich. So we are doing an interesting movie. Oh wait, I'm sorry, put up the wrong thing. So here's the thing: when we're doing these movies, we're picking. Everybody should know. Anybody who watches our show should know this. Rich and I have decided through the rest of the year. We know exactly what we're doing. Hopefully, knock on wood, no more hurricanes.
We're gonna have to knock off one of those films though to make up for losing that week. I was gonna bring that up.
I know. We'll talk about it. But the movie we're doing next week is an interesting film. It is a fun film. It is not. I don't know that it gets the love it deserves. Because I think there were a lot of other movies that were kind of out there doing their own thing. But this movie, The Last American Virgin, it has a great soundtrack. It has a very big heart on its sleeve. And it's a very well done teen comedy. It's smutty, but it's also demure. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger picking a bride on Mars. Okay, it's smutty, but it's demure. It's got a good heart to it, and even though it's got a lot of serious shit going on, much like Fast Times at Ridgemont High that we talked about. But it is in the same ballpark as Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and it's I would argue that it's probably been overshadowed by it. But we like giving things a chance to get out of the shadow and step into your car and your life. And this is one of my favorite 80s teen movies because it's got a real serious thing going on. Like, it's got a serious chunk to it, but it also has people acting really goofy and being confused about all kinds of smutty stuff. So, Last American Virgin next week. Rich, where can people find you and your stuff?
Well, starting tomorrow, for the next 4 days, you can find me banging around the Javits Center at New York Comic Con.
Congratulations. Good luck with that. Be safe.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I will be. I will be, everybody will be masked, which is nice. You can find my dispatches from New York Comic Con at FILMBUFFonline.com. Also, either if I get it done tonight or at some point over the next day or two, I'll drop the new episode of the other podcast that I do with my very good friend Natasha Bogutsky. That's the Big Picture podcast, and in that episode, we're at the midway point of both House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power, and we kind of talk about both of them and contrast and compare what we like, what we don't like about each, and how they're working for us. Like I said, hopefully, maybe tonight if I can finish packing, and then, or if not, you'll see it by the weekend at some point. And also, I'm on Twitter, just at FilmBuff online or FilmBuff Rich, and you can see me arguing with people about the aspect ratio for moonlighting, which is what I did today.
They're making a big announcement about moonlighting, right? That's the rumor.
That he and Disney, Disney owns ABC, Circle Films, which are the company that produced Moonlighting. They're prepping the show for some kind of streaming. They haven't said with.
I'm going to guess Hulu.
I'm thinking Hulu, yeah.
I'm going to guess Hulu.
But he said it's going to be a long process and it's going to take a while, but he can say at least that they've started it. And so I'm thinking there's a long process of clearing a lot of music rights. And this show, was shot on 35 millimeter film. I would love for them, as nice as I think the DVD sets are, which I still have, which have been long out of print though. I would love to see them maybe remaster these things into high def or 4K, because you're working off of just, film masters. I believe the entire show was finished on 35 millimeter film. And that way, you know, it can look crisper and everything. And, you know, somebody was like, well, then let's get it, you know, widescreen. I'm like, no, that's going to kill the
no
composition
that's
of
not
the
that's not rude. You
square,
also,
you know,
I think whatever happens with moonlighting is a great thing. I think you also have one of the sound discussions of our lifetime right now about Fletch. I want to talk about that really quick before we leave tonight. So,
okay.
the Fletch reboot, I've not seen it yet. Because again, Hurricane. I had a problem.
You can only use that excuse so much, buddy.
Yeah, next 2 weeks. I'm in for the long haul on this one.
Okay.
Until I get caught up in everything, then I'll be like, oh, I'm lazy. Like, it'll work. I'll promise. It'll even out. So you had a great debate about this Fletch movie, about why it didn't succeed. The worst marketing and the worst rollout I've ever seen for any movie, which is odd because Paramount's been doing such a bang up job. It's weird because they've had a really good year releasing things and moving things around at the right time, moving Smile from streaming into, you know, make a $22 million opening. So it's weird, but I think Natasha and you got into a generational war about it that I found so intriguing. And I also need to point out it's our fault. If people if people from our age don't talk about Fletch enough, that's on us. And if people, you know, so I was talking to some of my younger friends who don't know what the fuck Fletch was, and that requires me to go, okay, then we have to watch Fletch, and not necessarily with the idea in my head that it's going to succeed for them. Like that's the problem why I don't think you and I have rolled it out to people, because I think it is a very specific, smarmy, wise ass movie that is very specific and very, very pointed at us, like like people like you or I, who are also very smarmy and snarky in real life.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to land for everybody is part of the problem why we haven't done that. So I think it's on us. I felt intrigued by the concept that there was a poll going on. Do enough people know about the Fletch reboot? And it's like, no, but it's also our fault. And because nobody cares.
And I think once again, Natasha and I sometimes have this, you know, we kind of butt heads on things because we're both kind of like in our own bubbles that, you know, definitely have some overlap, but otherwise we wouldn't be best friends. But there are times when I'll be like, what do you mean you don't know about this? Everybody knows about, you know, X, like Fletch or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no. And I was like, and it sometimes sets me back. I'm like, oh crap, that's right. I'm in my bubble of specific film friends, and we all have Fletch as one of the things in common because we kind of grew up with it. And then she'll say, well, this is the best.
You had a VHS of it. I had a VHS of it. We loaned our VHSs to other friends that wanted to see it. Yes.
I mean,
it is.
We wrote an adaptation of it for radio drama in college, and we produced that, you know, in college. So, you know,
and it's one of the top 5 comedies of the 80s. Like it's just is.
Yeah.
But I think it was an interesting. I just want to bring it to this show because it was an interesting, funny debate. But I told you in my comment, I think it's our fault.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
We haven't gotten everybody onto it, and it's very hard to have a reboot of something. Like a reboot of Ghostbusters is easy because Ghostbusters is everywhere. But Fletch. Now, the funny thing about it is it's been almost rebooted 6 times. So it's this weird thing where like everybody and their brother in comedy wanted to do Fletch. Right? And you and I have been talking about Fletch reboot for a while. Like, you know, you and I were talking about it when it was Kevin Smith and Jason Lee and, you know, all the people that have kind of circled around it. Jason Sudeikis.
Scrubs at one point.
Bill Lawrence and Zach Braff. Sudeikis and somebody else there.
Yeah.
All of these people have circled around it because they have a touchstone to it. But nobody, not necessarily everybody that, and I understood her point. It's like, nobody knows what the fuck this movie is. And I was like, I understand. I do. And I feel it's us. I'm going to take the responsibility on this one because we didn't prep you enough to tell you that this is a comedy movie you need to see because it hits all the right notes.
Yeah.
And although it is distinctly Chevy Chase, it's really a Chevy Chase comedy. Like, it's a heavy on the Chevy.
As a fan of the books, I will say Chevy overwhelms the
material.
Role. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And what Sam Hamm does, what John Hamm does here. Sorry, I was thinking of Batman there for a second. John Hamm here just kind
also would have been a good choice for Batman.
Yes. Makes it his own. And he's much closer towards the books. I think he's a book fan as well as Greg Mottola, the writer-director. And
yeah, and he gave up his fucking money he gave up his fucking salary to get it released. That's like Don Bluth putting up his house.
Yeah,
so
he basically
that's a tie-in.
Like 3 more days of production by giving up, a good portion of his salary, and that should be rewarded. The movie should do better. Everybody see it, enjoy it, and
I will as soon as I'm over this hurricane binge I'm on. Sorry.
I know.
I'm on a hurricane binge. Okay, have a great night tonight. Everybody have a great night. We'll see everybody next week. Yeah. Last American Virgin next week, people. If you haven't seen it, get it, find it. We'll talk about it. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. And the soundtrack is banging. It is a banging soundtrack. Have a great night. Stay safe.